how did we live like that? Like I came across some cassette tapes the other day. I was cleaning out, like, how did you put those in? And you had to rewind and want to fast forward if you didn't like a
Yeah.
song or something. I mean, how do we live like that? So when you think about that now, I think that's what comes to mind. But maybe Dustin, finish the thought. How do we live today? How does that operate today?
So today, all of it lives in the cloud. And so, what is the cloud? The cloud is a centralized repository for all of the data across your organization, wherein you don't have to have these remote desktop services anymore. They just sign into a website just like they would with any other service that they use today. We have APIs that connect all of the services that would need your images to our system. And so it may be that they don't even need to sign in. All of that data is just pulled automatically through some automated process. We've got AI systems that are connected to the imaging platforms today that are automating, everything from detecting carries to attaching those images, to those claims without a human involved. And so, really we're just solving the problem of all of the workflow friction that involves getting access to what is, again, that fundamental ground truth data that comes out of that clinical process that really everything else relies on.
Welcome, everybody. Brian Kaleo here, Director of Dykema's DSO Industry Group. Got my co-host, Matt McGaw, here, and we've got two special guests today from SOTA Cloud, Ryan Chan, the VP of Revenue, and Dustin Johnson, the CTO. Dustin, I think that means Chief Technology Officer. I don't know if I'm getting it right or wrong or whatever, but welcome to the two of you, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Brian.
Thank you.
All right. Well, look, we don't mess around on this show. We kind of jump right into it. So this is the DSO Technology Show. SOTA Cloud is one of the leaders in sort of images and sort of how you handle images. I think, and I want you guys to correct me because I want to make sure I understand this, but, sort of how we handle images, and integrate them with PMS systems and how they can transfer. But maybe one of you guys can jump in and tell us the specific value add and the advancements that we've seen recently in sort of image technology.
Yeah, so I think just to frame the history of imaging a little bit ahead of introducing SOTA Cloud and what we do, imaging is really at the core of the dental workflow. And in fact, it's one of the first things that a patient undergoes when they walk into an office is they get their x-rays taken. And so it's kind of taken for granted that imaging is just part and parcel in dentistry. But there's a lot of moving parts to that, everything from equipment to software that it has to integrate with to the insurance claims process. It all touches imaging. And so what SOTA Cloud exists to do is make imaging interconnected, to make it so that you are not trapped within the framework of the legacy imaging providers. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about that today. We're about interoperability and freedom and being a connected system so that images can go where they need to.
Well, maybe talk to us, because that's a great point, Dustin. Maybe you or Ryan or something. Talk to us about if I went to the dentist 10 years ago and I had an x-ray, where would that image go versus what's happening today, with image technology?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I'll kind of walk you through the process. The patient walks into the office, they get seated in a chair, an intraoral sensor gets placed into their mouth. 10 years ago already, most practices were digital. There was some hanger-oners that were kind of, not quite there yet and still using film, but most practices in the US were digital 10 years ago. They would take that x-ray would then get transferred to a server sitting in a closet in that dental practice. And generally speaking, this was standard across the industry, and it didn't matter if it was a single location or if you had 1,000 locations in your DSO, every single location had that server that had that location's images in it. And so, again, just speaking to the problem of, well, what happens after they take the x-ray? Now they've got to get those images somewhere. Whether that's to the clearinghouse for a claim, whether that's to another provider for a referral, they're taking the data off of that server that's stuck in that closet, and they're doing a bunch of manual labor to move it around where it has to go. And so I think that's kind of the summary.
So what would you do back then 10 years ago if you had this image sitting on a server in your closet, and putting aside the issue of there wasn't really a cloud 10 years ago, and if a mudslide or an earthquake or a tornado or a hurricane or a fire or something wrecked that practice, you might possibly lose all those images unless you had them backed up some other way. Putting aside that issue, what would you have to do? You'd have to capture that image and and drag it maybe possibly into an insurance claim, or how would that work?
Yeah, so I mean, you'd be taking a screenshot to attach that thing to an insurance claim, opening it up, your legacy imaging system. Generally speaking, and this is the DSO technology podcast. If you're a DSO and you're trying to centralize your claims processing and everything, probably there's some guy sitting in a building somewhere using remote desktop to get into that office's network and then having to pull that stuff off of that server, which is a huge pain. And then let's say you want to send that patient again for a referral. You're burning that sucker to a disk, or you're putting it onto a paper printout that you're handing to the patient.
Yeah, no, and obviously we know that's not efficient, and sometimes it's like, how did we live like that? Like I came across some cassette tapes the other day. I was cleaning out, like, how did you put those in? And you had to rewind and want to fast forward if you didn't like a song or something. I mean, how do we live like that? So when you think about that now, I think that's what comes to mind. But maybe Dustin, finish the thought. How do we live today? How does that operate today?
So today, all of it lives in the cloud. And so, what is the cloud? The cloud is a centralized repository for all of the data across your organization, wherein you don't have to have these remote desktop services anymore. They just sign into a website just like they would with any other service that they use today. We have APIs that connect all of the services that would need your images to our system. And so it may be that they don't even need to sign in. All of that data is just pulled automatically through some automated process. We've got AI systems that are connected to the imaging platforms today that are automating, everything from detecting caries to attaching those images, to those claims without a human involved. And so, really we're just solving the problem of all of the workflow friction that involves getting access to what is, again, that fundamental ground truth data that comes out of that clinical process that really everything else relies on.
So how does that work then? I mean, to people that maybe are not super tech savvy, you get a scan, you get an x-ray, you get something like that. Where does it go today with modern technology? Does it, integrate right into the PMS system, or where does it go?
Yeah, it does. So many practice management systems, what they'll do is right within the chart next to the odontogram, you'll be able to pick the teeth that you want to look at, and they'll pull the images directly out of SOTA Cloud, kind of place it into the chart for you so that it's right there alongside the rest of your clinical information. In many cases, that's going to include an overlay of AI findings, and so you can really, on a one-to-one basis, go, hey, I'm looking at the chart, I see that there's caries on a particular tooth. I can see right next to it without having to open another system, without having to, do any extra effort, jump between screens. All of that data is in one place.
And how difficult is all this? Because, I've spoken at length about the challenges to implementation of new technology. And I said, one, there's got to be education. Two, there's got to be integration with a PMS system. Three, there's got to be implementation. If you're a big organization, if you're not one office, if you're a DSO and you got multiple,
Yeah.
you have to have a plan of implementation. You can't just magically think it's going to show up in 50 offices. And if you can get proper education, proper integration with the PMS system, proper plan of implementation, then you get adaptation. I mean, this is what I speak about when I talk about this. How does sort of, the image function and what SOTA Cloud doing fit within that?
There's a few things that we think about when we're rolling out our product, or if you're considering just changing any kind of imaging solution within your organization. You have two things that you need to worry about. The first thing is you need to find a way to take all of the data that you already have, probably in those servers and closets across your organization, and move it into the centralized repository. And so what we do is we have a bunch of tooling that we've made that works with every single system that's in the industry today. That goes on your server and it just automatically pumps that data where it needs to be, and you don't have to worry about it. The second thing you need to worry about after you convert the data that you're already sitting on into a format that the other system can use is you need to worry about change management. You have to get your users onboarded. You have to get people trained. You have to get your equipment integrated. You have to get your software integrated. And so really, I would just say, generally speaking, what you have to think about as you're planning for this kind of rollout is is the company that I'm working with and that I'm partnering with, do they have the background and capability and know how to do all of these things seamlessly? And are they really the experts that can guide me through that process and give me the plan that I need to be successful? It's just like any other project. I mean, if you've pulled up, for example, in any other kind of industry where they're using a CRM like a HubSpot or a Salesforce or something, and you have to manage this huge complex technical change across the organization, really it's like you don't want the pain of that, and it sounds really like intimidating and complicated when you put it that way, but that's kind of what's happening. But if you work with the right partner, it doesn't feel like that. It goes as smoothly as apple pie, right? Like you don't have to have that problem. And Ryan, I think with his background can speak a little bit to this. He's worked in basically every kind of software, within the market today. He's done everything from practice management to imaging to RCM. So I'll actually flip that one over to Ryan. And
I'll ask Ryan this question right now. What are people doing now? Meaning, if they're not using SOTA Cloud or some solution like that right now, they don't maybe have the server in the closet like 10 years ago. But what are they doing right now, and what would a transition look like? Like, what would the immediate day after the transition look like for them in terms of streamlining, making things better, simpler, more automated?
Well, it depends. There's a big variety there, right? They may be using a hodgepodge of on-prem imaging
Right.
solutions. They may be using some embedded imaging from a PMS company. Ultimately, if they see the benefit and value of what we offer, which is tremendous, the onboarding process is super straightforward. I mean, we can get a practice, from beginning to end, about 3 weeks up and running. And quite frankly, we can get them using the software and trained much quicker than that. It's just if there's a conversion, that would run in the background for about a period of 3 weeks. But again, there's a lot of. Mhm.
I'll interrupt Ryan a little bit. I think Ryan is still living in kind of the shadow of some former work that he's done. Actually, with SOTA Cloud, our typical conversion timeline once we get a customer set up is sub 1 week.
Incorrect.
So that capability has gotten faster.
Well, Ryan, I mean, look, let's not dump on Ryan. Ryan,
Uh,
how long you been
a
there?
month.
Yeah, no, we
Yeah,
know we know
yeah.
Ryan for years being in the industry, but look, he just kind of showed up there, Dustin. So we're gonna cut him a break. But the accurate information, though, I do want to give that. You think it's under a week?
Under a week for most offices. Yeah.
No, I mean, so somebody then tell me, and maybe Ryan can talk a little bit in a little while about the direction this is headed and what he sees the plans in the next 6 months to a year. But Dustin, while we still got you here on this part of it, maybe tell us, a little bit about what sort of happens, the day after, like what they're utilizing now, and then after that week when they transition, what's the benefit or what are they going to see immediately?
Well, the first thing that they're going to see just within the attitudes of their dental assistants who are using these products every single day is a sense of relief and joy. Because the fact is that in the early days of dental imaging, a lot of these products were just put together by engineers who were building hardware. And so, you had the companies that were making the sensors and making the pano machines and everything else, putting together software just so that you could use them, but without really any intentionality and the interface and the user experience. And so I think one of the things that's really, underappreciated about modern software is we actually have people that do UI UX design. And so, a lot of the times the first feedback that we get from folks that are transitioning to new software is, hey, this is really easy to use. And it's like, yeah, because that's the intention is we're a software company. We thought about, the way that the software should work for the people that are actually engaging with it every day, as opposed to being a hardware company that's just putting together something that operates the hardware. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, when we're looking at the kind of organization-wide changes that you see, I think the first thing is, surprisingly for a lot of orgs, an increase in case acceptance. And that's because what you've done now is you've standardized the playbook for the way that not only imaging works across your organization, but the way that case presentation works across the organization. And this is a little bit funny. It's like people don't assume, like, don't make the connection that the imaging product in the vast majority of cases is your case presentation tool. That's what's on the display.
Well, I mean, at least on my dentist, which is sort of the state of the art DSO. You sit there and you put your chair, and right in front of you, you've
Right.
got like Pearl AI and your X-ray, and there's pink stuff, and they're telling you stuff,
Exactly.
but you're looking at it like they're looking at. Now, recently, I went because I've got residences in a couple
Hmm.
locations, and my clients are really really nice, and they
Yeah.
arranged for like a different dentist office for me to go to because I needed to get a cleaning, and they weren't completely set up on that, and I don't think they're going to invite me back because I was like, hey, where's the Pearl? Where's this? Hey,
Yeah.
how come I can't see that? And I think very quickly they were kind of unhappy with my question, but
Well, that's a super good point. Yeah, it's a great point, Brian. And actually, it's funny. Like when we look at the way the entire industry is adopting AI and imaging, actually, if you look at the offices utilizing Pearl and utilizing video, what you're seeing is that their utilization within those organizations goes through the roof when they use SOTA Cloud because they don't have to leave into another software in order to see that stuff. Normally in the daily flow, they're taking the x-rays, they're just kind of leaving it up on the screen. They don't want more clicks, they don't want more stuff that they have to do. Because that AI interface is directly embedded into SOTA Cloud, it's no longer an extra click. It's just the de facto standard of care that those AI findings are surfacing on the screen in real time as you're working with the patient. And so imagine the experience, like as a patient with an interconnected platform, you're sitting there as the patient watching them
I
take
don't
the
gotta
x-rays and
imagine it. I
seeing
did it,
things.
and like Matt,
It's
Matt knows this.
fantastic.
We gotta get Matt
Yeah.
involved a little bit, but Matt knows this. 55,000 people looked at my trip to the dentist, and when I was sitting there, and it did kind of blow my mind, Brian and Dustin, when I was sitting there, and this was implementation of all kinds of stuff. It had Pearl AI, it had the regular X-ray, it probably had SOTA Cloud, and you're looking at it all there with the pink dot on top of the screen, and then the dentist is like, well, this pink dot means you've got very minor decay, and in the case of mine, I think they put Curodont on it, and it was like a whole big thing, but you had it in front of you, and you felt like you were, Matt, like you were collaborating, like you were part of the experience. So to me, on the case acceptance front, I feel like, at least from personal experience, when the patients feel like they're collaborating, Matt, and they're involved in the patient experience, they have a higher likelihood of getting acceptance and buy-in to whatever the course of treatment or the recommended treatment plan might be.
Yeah, I mean, I think imaging is probably one of the most, if not the most important part of presenting treatment to a patient is having good imaging. And that's why, to me, from your perspective, guys, like it's probably the second hardest thing to get practices, to get DSOs to switch to, is switching their imaging. I think number one is
Why
going to be,
is that? Why is that?
well, number one's going to be practice management, and number two
Yeah,
is going
yeah.
to be imaging because they're in it every day, and they being like everybody inside the practice is typically inside the imaging at some point. So more individuals that touch a product makes it more difficult for these DSOs and these practices to switch another product because you said something earlier, Dustin, about like, oh, this is great, this is easy to use, is like the first reaction. And to
Hmm.
me, that's probably because they were like, oh my, I've got to switch this, and I'm really concerned. Like, I don't know, I'm so used to clicking these buttons, and now I've got to click these buttons.
Well, it's even more than that. It's like if you look at some of the other systems that are on the market, and we've benchmarked this, it's 11 clicks versus 2 clicks, right? And so again, it's just intentionality in modern software where the user experience has really come to the forefront. I mean, we have best practices now when we build software that you didn't have 20 years ago when some of these legacy systems were being built. And so it's not just a simple matter of like, well, they had some kind of like hype around the fact that they had to change. It's that actually the practices of building software have just completely changed. And I'll piggyback off of one other thing, just while we're on the topic of the case presentation. Operationally, as a DSO, and we talk to DSOs all the time, not a lot of them are thinking about this. Your best clinicians, the people that are surfacing the most valuable treatment, are not usually your best case presenters. And so when you can have a standardized platform that you're doing your case presentations out of in front of all of your patients, and a standard playbook and SOP for how you expect those presentations to work to help those folks that are great clinicians, fantastic diagnosticians,
It's like a
fantastic
surgical
administrators.
guide, except
Exactly.
a surgical
Exactly.
guide for explaining and selling the treatment
That's
plan
right.
as opposed to a surgical guide to actually do a clinical procedure. And what
That's
you're
right.
saying saying, Dustin, is if it fits the same format, it's easier to learn. It's easier for somebody that might not necessarily be good at it to learn this is the format, this is how you present it, it's this way every time. And
It's also easier as an organization for you to find out what works for the demographics and the patients that you serve, and then make sure that everybody's operating at peak efficiency in that area. And selling treatment is not, the easiest thing in the world, So once you find out what works and you can standardize on that, you're seeing, change in production at scale. I think a big part of this that people don't think about when they think, oh, it's imaging, it's a technical thing. It's like, no, it touches actually a lot of other pieces of your org that you don't think about.
There has to be some level of skepticism that exists because I did live in the imaging world, and this is probably 10, 12 years ago. And I remember I actually used to carry CDs around for oral surgeries and GPs, like, hey, Dr. Smith down the street, can you help me out here? You're going over there. That's the world I lived in. I remember some of the imaging platforms really lagging. There was some latency there because computers weren't up to spec.
Yeah.
I think if I'm coming from this, not being in the imaging world as much anymore, you've got to probably come up against that currently is hey, if I'm going to switch to this cloud stuff, yeah, in theory, it's great. Conceptually, it's great. But the ability to deliver and maybe the ease of use in how that works inside of a DSO, because let's be honest, Brian talked about the one location that didn't have all the tech, didn't have the Pearl. They might not have the best computers in the world. All of those questions pop into my mind if I'm a DSO and I'm thinking about switching this across the entire org.
Yeah, so there's a couple of pieces to that. One is, of course, internet performance. It's funny how optimized we can be today with the infrastructure that drives the way that cloud work. And so I'll just give you one example. Our director of sales, Scott Cote, he lives in the sticks in Idaho, in rural Idaho, in the forest. I mean, he looks out his window, he sees deer every day. I'm kind of jealous. It's a beautiful area. But he has there's no fiber, there's no cable internet. He uses satellite internet. He's on Starlink. And, he does all of his demos on Starlink. And on stormy days, it doesn't matter. Those demos are fantastic, and he's making sales every single day on this, frankly, not very good internet connection because we've advanced in technology to the extent that for modern platforms, we can get around performance bottlenecks. So that's one thing. I think the second thing is just, again, being intentional in the way that the system is architected to really deliver user experience. If that's not a priority when you're building a product because you're focused on, again, the hardware or some other component in the system, then it's going to lag. And I think that mindset just in the way that we build software these days has completely changed. And so, I can't speak for every organization, but when we set to build a new product, the key quality attribute all the time, especially in dental practices where people get very frustrated very quickly and they start mashing buttons trying to get to the next screen, is how fast can we get this thing to load, even if they're in the sticks? Because a lot of DSOs are operating in underserved communities and they're out in rural areas and they don't have good internet. And then to top that all off, it's what happens if the internet goes out? You have an offline mode that makes it so that they can take their x-rays offline, and when they come back online, it syncs up and everything goes smooth and everybody's happy. I think it's a different world these days.
so, Ryan, we've worked with you in a number of different roles in the DSO industry for many, many years. But tell us what excited you about this technology and why, you decided to kind of come on board at SOTA Cloud.
Well, it's funny. So I've actually known the team, the executive team, as well as most of the team in the company for many, many years. A lot of them are good friends. But a lot of people don't know that my first entry into the industry was really on the imaging side. And so I do have a good understanding of, the various solutions out there. And when I saw their product, I was absolutely blown away, not just from the workflow, the integrations, and some of the things that they can do that other platforms simply can't. And so I believe in the product, I believe in the team, and I've seen and heard directly from customers that told me the massive impact we made in their organization, whether it's increasing profitability, increasing adoption of AI solutions, giving them more flexibility on hardware, all the above. And so it was a really easy decision when Albert, our CEO, sent me a text and he goes, hey, I'm looking for a VP of revenue. I'm like, sign me up. I'm coming back to imaging.
So, all right, maybe Dustin, this question might be for you. What do we got on the horizon here? Like, I think I got a working knowledge of, the value add at present, and I've seen it, right from the chair. And I agree from the case presentation. It's amazing if all of these things work in conjunction with each other. The PMS system, SOTA Cloud, the, Pearl AI or something like that, and they're all together, it's absolutely terrific. But what do you got like on the horizon? Like what's coming up? Like what type of new advancements are up your sleeve if we're having this discussion 6 months or a year from now?
Well, I mean, I think the hot topic on everybody's mind and LinkedIn feed and everywhere that you look these days, I mean, to the point that it's getting a little bit frustrating to hear about it, but it really is going to have the biggest impact on our lives is AI, of course.
Well, no. See, now it's agentic AI. It used to be AI. Now everybody want to talk about agentic AI. But go ahead.
So you've totally, called me out here, Brian.
Go
That's
ahead.
kind of where I'm going, but
Go ahead.
I'll put a little bit of a different spin on it, okay? So really what you need in order to utilize this future agentic AI, and it's almost like a dirty word. Like I feel bad talking about this. I'm kind of tired of it myself, but it is what it is. It's like ultimately you have to have access to your data. That's the key thing. If you're in an environment that can't give you access to your data or doesn't have the back-end resources and design to have the infrastructure to support an agentic workload, which makes tons of calls and needs to, do a whole bunch of processing in order to actually make that system work, then you're going to be in a bad place, come 10 years from now when everybody's using this and that's the standard. And so really when we built our product, we set out to, from the very beginning, have a platform that would be scalable to hundreds of thousands of connections. And what that means is this, like, I don't want to get too in the weeds. I am the CTO, I'm the tech guy. I'm not going to bore your audience here too much. The important thing is, I'll tell a brief story. When I was in high school, I had a biology teacher who used to stand on a chair and tell everybody in the class, everything in life is about choices. And choices are what's going to make you successful. And I think the same thing is here today. If you're on a platform that's locking up all of your data, you have no choice. And so what we're here to do is we're here to give you optionality. We're here to give you freedom to market for the most valuable data that you have in your organization. And it doesn't matter if it's imaging, your practice management data, your calendars. If your systems are not capable of connecting to any other system, you have limited choice. Now, here's the thing. It's like, there's a good analogy. I can't remember who else in the industry said this. In the early days of search engines, we had Ask Jeeves, we had Alta Vista, we had all of these things. And then you had Google. And Google came like 10 years, 15 years after those other guys came. Could you imagine if Alta Vista was holding like all of your internet hostage and then Google came along and you couldn't use Google? Like how horrible that would be for your business and your productivity. That's, I think, what people have to worry about today. And as far as the future goes, if you can think of a job today that you have to hire somebody for and all it requires them to do is sit at a keyboard, that job is going away. That's frankly the direction that we're headed because there is going to be an agentic AI in the future that will do that thing. And so if your system is not set up in a way to let you do that thing because they can't get access to that data, you're cooked. So that's my 2-minute ramble about agentic AI.
What's going to be a cool thing that we're going to see? Like, I don't know, maybe we got to like sub in Ryan here or something, but like, I'm looking for something cool, like that you're going to be something like in the next 6 months, year, 2 years that you guys are going to break out. That's a big improvement or an innovation, if there is one.
I don't want to throw too much out there in terms of future roadmap. I'll tell you something we just launched like a couple of weeks ago that is the beginning of this. So we have a couple of things that we launched simultaneously. We had what we call the smart sensor come out. And the smart sensor is basically an X-ray sensor that has a bunch of capability that we're not even using everything for it yet. That's why we call it the smart sensor. The key thing is we launched a product called Smart Shot. And what Smart Shot does is it makes it so that two things happen. Every single time that you take an X-ray, that image is automatically optimized for the patient that you have sitting in the chair, their anatomy, to make sure that everything from exposure to noise to sharpness, contrast, all of that is optimized on a per image basis. That's a huge step forward from what used to happen when you'd have your imaging system set up on day one. None of your settings would ever change again. And basically, if you had a big heavy set guy come in and then you had a small child come in, all the same settings applied to both of those guys and the image looked horrible, right? So that's the first thing that we have. The second thing that we we just launched, and this is literally just like a week or two ago, is another piece of smart shot that's technique factor optimization and detection. And so we detect things when you're taking x-rays like missed apices, missed biting surfaces, cone cuts, closed contacts, all of the things that lead to your insurance claims getting rejected because your assistant didn't capture the right stuff in that x-ray. And so now you can imagine, just with the data that we get out of that, how can we have an agent working in the background to do things like recommend retraining of your DAs to you on a quarterly basis? How can we target the folks that are losing you the most revenue because those claims are getting submitted without appropriate retakes when they're needed? That's just one example of what agents in the future will be able to do without giving up the goat on all the other stuff that we have kind of in the pipe. So Ryan, I'll flip that to you if you want to add on, but I think that's what I'm excited about that I can share with you today.
No, you killed it. You killed it. I was actually going to touch on the sensor a bit, but you already addressed that. I mean, just the fact that, it can automatically detect underexposure, overexposure, cone cuts, etc. I know, being in the imaging business, one of the biggest challenges with image quality was always that the dental assistant kept it on the same exposure time with their Nomad, and then they would complain, well, why did the anterior look like this? Why did the posterior look like this? Now our software can literally tell you that. And just think about the productivity, and what you said in terms of claims being denied, or just diagnosis that brings to a practice. We have analytics that can tell you how many retakes are being done, how many intraoral photos are being taken. All those things measure up to productivity. And then besides that, we also have device health. So we can essentially tell a practice or a DSO how many errors are happening, and furthermore, what the likely cause is and what the fix is. So if you're a CIO, that's tremendously helpful. That's one of my favorite people to talk to, quite frankly, although Dustin does most of the talking.
So Matt, what do you think of these guys? I mean, we show up, Dustin's a CTO. You think he's going to be boring, but he actually is outgoing and he talks the entire time and explains stuff reasonably well that I can understand. Ryan just sort of started over there, but he's excited about the whole thing. I like the presentation, when I sat in the chair and actually saw this stuff in action. What do you make of these guys, Matt? Like, what do you think of all this?
I mean, I've known Ryan a while. He's a good guy. Dustin, it's great to meet you. Personally, they seem great. Product itself, I mean, there's a reason why there's so much stink in the world right now about these data centers that are being built. I mean, why are these data centers being built? They're being built because we're going to live in the cloud, and AI is going to be driving a lot of this through the agentic workflows, right? I don't know about you guys. Like, somebody could come in and wipe this computer completely clean, and I don't miss a beat because everything is in the cloud. Now, dental practices are a lot different because there's different levels. I mean, there's some out there that have paper charts. There's some out there that have all the fancy tech. But ultimately, we're going to get to a point where things are in the cloud. And I see the writing on the wall, Dustin, for what you're talking about from the agentic workflow stuff inside the imaging. I think you're probably being very coy about what some of the functionality is going to be, but it's probably pretty cool to be you right now as you're working to develop some really cool features that ultimately are going to support DSOs, support the clinics, support the doctors, and I think support enterprise value when it comes to even just having cloud-based imaging platforms. So super excited to see your progress, guys. Thanks for joining.
Well, Dustin, are we going to see some cool stuff? I mean, I get it. Like, nobody on here should be telling us proprietary stuff that they can't release yet. We don't want that. But is there going to be some really cool stuff in a year and a half if we sit tight?
Very cool stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, we're in the most exciting time to be in my chair, probably in history. And so, I couldn't be more fortunate to have, the opportunity that we have with technology where it is today and the team that we have. And frankly, the customers in the industry that we have. I think everybody's going to have a really exciting couple of years. I think we've already had a very exciting couple of years with a lot of the things that have come out. I mean, it's like the biggest shift in dental technology ever. That wave is going to continue. And, I think it's actually going to get even more exciting.
Now, right now, Ryan, this is a SaaS-based product. There's like a monthly subscription fee. That's how it operates.
That's correct. Yes. Our SOTA Cloud, all of our products are subscription based. So whether that's SOTA Cloud in our different packages or our sensor, it's all sold as a subscription.
This is the part, we try not to make this an infomercial, but if somebody loves this and they want to hear more about it, how do they get in touch with, you guys or SOTA Cloud, or how do they get a demo or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty big on LinkedIn. They can always DM me. I'm happy to introduce them to my sales team. We have a great sales team. They can also go to our website, sotacloud.com, and fill out a form. In any case, we love to talk to them. Our sales team is growing every day, so we have plenty of capacity to speak to them and get them a demo or pilot. If you're a DSO, you could pilot us.
All right, well, guys, we're just about out of time here. I love talking about all things technology. I think imaging is something I'm going to be watching really, really closely. I'm excited to see, what's next for you guys in the next several months. What I always say is when human beings were working on this stuff, it kind of goes like this. When AI is working on it, it goes like this. So I can't wait to see, probably in a matter of months what else is going to come out. But I appreciate both of you, Ryan and Dustin, being here today. And this has been the DSO Technology Show. And thanks, everybody, for being here on behalf of myself and my
Thanks for
co-host,
having
Matt
us.
McGaw.
Thanks for having
Thanks,
us.
guys.
Thank you.